Okay, it's time to build the third module. So after we've built this 12-tone matrix thing over here, we need to send this data, the inverted form along with the prime form, to a couple different locations. So we're going to click in this blank spot here and create a new object, boc.eval, and then we need to give it a couple special parameters. So if you see in the original over here, I have at inlets 2, at triggers 0, at extra outlets 3. So all those need to be added as arguments to our boc.eval object. So we need at inlets 2, at triggers 0, at extra outlets 3. That just sort of primes it for the behavior we need. Basically, we've got 2 inlets, 4 outlets, and then the triggers means that both these inlets are what's called hot. So because those are both red inlets, as opposed to like a blue inlet here, that means any time data comes in this inlet, it will trigger the calculation. All right, so we're going to first send the prime form into the left inlet here by creating a receive object for this row 1 right here. So receive, type R, and then type row 1. Connect that. And then let's do this with a send and receive object also. Theoretically, we could just take the result of this. We need this contextually inverted form we made over here from this boc.eval object. We could connect it with a patch cord, but to keep things clean, let's use a send. So create a new object over here, press S for send, and type, you can call this anything you want, but I'm calling mine inv1. Connect that. And then type a receive object over here. Oops. And receive inv1. Connect that. So now we've got the prime form coming in here and the contextually inverted form coming in here. And lock the patch and double click on your boc.eval object. We'll pull up the original code so we have a model. So all we're doing here is naming some variables to make them a little easier to think about, and then taking their retrogrades and then sending them to a couple different outlets. So first thing we need to do is create a prime variable equal to the first set of data. So whenever I name variables in this system, it's always in reference to the inlet they're coming in. So this is the variable x1 coming in the first inlet. So we're calling that prime form. We're doing nothing to it. We're just giving it a new name so we can use that name instead of the old name. Now we need to take the retrograde of that. So we're going to create a new variable called retrograde equal to the reverse of the prime form. So you've seen that function before, rev, and then what's in parentheses is what gets reversed. So we just use the prime variable to keep things easy to organize in our minds, and then we go and hit colon and new line, and now we're going to create a variable called inversion, and this is going to just be equal to that data coming in the second inlet, not changing that one either. And then we need the retrograde inversion, so I'm going to call this retrograde underscore inversion is equal to the inversion reversed. So this is reverse of the inversion. And again, any variable name has to be preceded by the $sign. Okay, so we've got our variables named. Now we need to send them out to the appropriate outlets. So create the outlet function and parentheses, and then this is a list of how many outlets you want with spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4 is what we need. Hit comma. Now this is the data you're going to send to these outlets, and it goes in the same order as that number list. And so if I write prime and then retrograde and then inversion and then retrograde inversion, and notice I'm separating out each data entry by a comma, then prime is going to come out the first inlet here, retrograde is going to come out the second inlet here, inversion comes out the third, and retrograde inversion comes out the fourth inlet, and close the entire statement in parentheses. And then I think actually in mine I do some returns here to make this a little more compact. save that code. If you've done everything right, it should save properly. Let's see if we have any errors. We've saved the code. Check our max window. Good, it loaded it fine. All right, so now we're going to create some send objects, 4 send objects here to send that data to where we need it to go in the next module. So create a send object and call this one prime. I'm going to call mine prime1 because I don't want interference with my patch I already made. So I'm going to put numbers at the end of every one of mine, but you can just call yours prime, retrograde, and inversion. That's fine. Another send. This is going to be retrograde. This one's going to be the inversion. This one's going to be the retrograde inversion. Great. And because that didn't take too long, let's just move on to the next module. So now we got to build the part that actually shows the pitches and the set class. This probably looks like the fanciest thing we've got to build, and in a way it is, but the core of it is very simple. The core of it is just this object that displays the pitches. The fancy stuff comes with trying to update this clock diagram constantly when the data is changed. But the core of the display is not hard to make, so we start with probably the most common object in the Bach library called the Bach.roll object. So new object, Bach.roll. All right, this is a proportional notation editor. So if you lock the patch and you can hold control and click on this editor, that can create notes. You can select those notes and move them around. You can select and then hold control before letting go of your mouse, and then you get a proportional window you can stretch. It's a very powerful editor. There's many things you can do, but basically we're just going to use it to display the row forms. So let's keep track of which row form we're working on by writing a comment. So empty space and then write C. Call this one prime. Control J to trim the comment. And then we need a clear selection command. We need some commands for this role. So clear selection, connect that to the first inlet of the role. We need a dump. Oops. I always do this. I create a new object when what I mean is message and vice versa. So new message, dump space sense. Connect that to the first inlet of the role. And finally, we need a zoom function. So create a number box and then create a message and type zoom space $1. This is sort of like string formatting in a regular programming language where this 0 replaces this variable number in this string, and then it gets sent to this role as a command. So we change this number, it changes our zoom level, and that whole string gets sent to the Bach.roll object. And if we click some notes to test this and then drag on our zoom, it should zoom horizontally for us. Good, it does. All right. Set that back to 0, delete all these notes. And now we need to get the prime form of the row into this object. So intuitively what we would want is just something like receive prime1 and send it into this object. Now it's a little trickier than that, but that is the basic idea. So we need to create a receive prime1 object, and then we need to turns out we need to wrap that in a layer of brackets because we want to tell Bach.roll to interpret it like it's going to the first voice. So we don't want to try to distribute these pitches in multiple voices. So we got to do a new object called Bach.wrap. This will wrap it in a single layer of parentheses, or actually brackets, square brackets. And finally, we need to convert the integers. So we're sending pitch class integers. We need to convert them to a form of pitches that Bach can understand. So we're going to use an object called the Bach PC #2 MC object, and that converts pitch class integers to MIDI sense within the C4 octave. So this is all going to be compressed in a single octave, but that's fine. And then once you've got that, connect the Bach PC to MC object to the third inlet of the Bach.roll object called, and if you hover over it, it should say pitches or cents. Okay, let's drag all this down so we have a little more room. Okay, so if we hit this, if we change this row, we should get a prime form in here. Let's see. Nothing appears. Okay, we forgot one more step, which is every time that you send data to the Bach.roll object, you need to send what's called a bang to that object as well to build it. So the data is actually inside that object right now, but if we need to send the command to build that data. So this is one of the most iconic objects in Max. It's called the button. All it does is sends sort of an impulse to execute an action. And what it actually does changes depending on the object you're sending it to. But in this case, if we send this button here to this first inlet of Bach.roll and we lock the patch and click the button, now that 12-tone row, that prime form is in there, and you can zoom out to see it. All right. So we always need to be sending this bang every time that we send data here. So instead of drawing this button, I'm going to do it a little more compact of a way because later on we're going to need multiple bangs to do multiple tasks. So for right now, you just got to trust me and set up an object, a new object, and this is a trigger. We've used this before. Just type T for short and then write B space B space B. All right, that's trigger bang bang bang. A couple of these bangs will be used for other tasks, but the one that we want is the first bang out of this. We want to go to the first inlet of the roll. All right, so now in addition to this, in addition to the pitches coming out of the Bach PC to MC object, also connect that to the first inlet of trigger. And that's what's cool about the trigger object is it doesn't matter what sort of data is coming to the trigger object. It's just going to convert that data into whatever you tell it. So it doesn't care necessarily what form of information is coming into it. It's just going to say, okay, I've got information. Now what do I do? And it turns out here we told it to bang 3 times. So we'll use those other bangs in a moment, but this is the core of the setup here. So every time that we send a new row here, this should change it. Good. So oops, it's changing my other one too. That's so weird. Oh, right, because because I've named these, I forgot to name these retrograde 1 and retrograde 2. Right. This is not a problem you'll have probably because I'm teaching you how to do this from scratch. But if it turns out if you have the other patch open, the original patch at the same time, then these send commands interfere with one another. That's why you have to make sure that they're named unique things if they're doing unique things. Okay, so now this should not change anything. Let's see here. Yay. Okay. So, right. So the point of this was to just show you that, look, we changed the row and the prime form changes over here. Okay, so this is now constantly updating. Every time we choose a row, it's going to show a different prime form. All right, now, instinctually, your first instinct would be like, well, let's create this. Let's just copy this, and then we'll label this retrograde. And then we'll, instead of the receive object being the prime form, we'll make the receive object the retrograde form. Okay, and that should work. Let's test that. Cool, so now we're getting 2 different forms of the row, and they constantly update. So that is basically what we're going to do, but we're just hold off on that for a second because we have a few more features to add over here, and if we make those first, then we won't have to, we can just copy the whole system and paste. Okay, so next, we want a system to display it on this cool clock diagram. So the object for that in the Bach library is called Bach.circle. And here I'm just going to go through. This is the most complicated part of this. You're not necessarily going to understand all the the reasons for everything here, but just bear with me, and by the end of this, you should have a functioning object. So you need an object called block.flap. This is going to take parentheses off. Connect that to the third outlet of the block.roll object. You need a block.mc2pc object. Connect that. Now create a message. Connect that to the, I believe it's the, right, the last outlet of this trigger. What this is going to do is this is an editable box, so you can write numbers in here separated by spaces, and this will pick certain elements out of the row for you to look at. And next, create another trigger. This is the most complex one. B, space L, space L, space B. So that's read from right to left. Bang, list, list, bang, bang. And send the first outlet of bang to clear selection. First outlet of this trigger to clear selection. Send the second outlet to an iter object. It means iterate. Send the iter object to a number box. Send the number box to a command, a message called cell space note if chord index double equal sign variable sign 1. So the variable sign 1 just is a placeholder for whatever this number that we're going to give it, and this command is like a formatted string that gets sent to the block.roll object. So the output of this message sent to the first inlet of the roll. The third outlet of the trigger here is going to be sent to a block.wrap object. This is going to wrap our choices of elements in a set of brackets. Create a block.nth object, nth, with the argument @out t, which is going to send it out in text form. Send that block.wrap object to the right inlet of the nth object, and the block MC to PC outlet to the left inlet of block.nth. Now, the fourth inlet of the trigger has to go up to dump sense here. And finally, create a clear message and a dump message, and these are both going to be for block.circle. Connect the last outlet of the trigger to the dump message, and connect the dump message to the first inlet of the block.circle object. Connect the clear object to the first inlet of the circle object as well, and then connect this clear object to the middle bang of this trigger up here. Almost there. We need to connect this trigger object finally to this list of numbers here. And then I think we're pretty much good. So basically, if I type 1, 2, 3, 1, space 2, space 3, space, let's say 5. This is order numbers of things we're going to pick out of this row. So if I click this, it picks the first element, the second element, the third element, and the fifth element. All right. Now, what should happen is those numbers should get displayed on the circle diagram, but because we haven't sent, usually that the row is going to get sent automatically. Oh, we also didn't connect it. You got to connect this block.nth object to the circle object. first inlet of the circle object. Now let's see if this works. That's right. So this will show the pitch class set and which actual pitches you have. So we have a C sharp, which is 1, which is this. We have a B flat, which is 10, which is this. And then F is here and F sharp's here. Now to show the actual all the numbers like I have in my object here, you can click on this circle object. Here's another general feature of Macs you can learn by doing this, which is the inspector. So press Control I or Command I if you're a Mac, and this menu on the right will be brought up, and these are sort of like attributes that you can change about each object. And some of these, and in fact most of them, you can change by sending messages to the object, but sometimes you just want to change them permanently. And in this case, we're going to change this so that it's displaying all the numbers for every point in the diagram. And let's find what that is. Setting point names. Which attribute is this? Annotation. Let's figure out which one I sent here. Oh. Right. I see. So scroll down to where it says show, and where it says show numbers, from never, change that to always. And that will display the pitch class integer at all times. Cool. So now whenever we change this list, and then click on it, it will select those elements. You can see it doesn't really matter if I give it a duplicate, it just sort of ignores it. And so, and it also doesn't matter what order you give them in. You can just do that and it'll know to select the 11th element. So again, you have to be in unlocked mode to edit this list, and then once you are, you can lock it and then click to examine the elements. Last thing, we want to know the prime form of this set at any given time. So to do that, there's a special object called boc.primeForm. So to create the object, boc.primeForm, give it the argument @out t to convert to text format, and then send the first outlet of the boc.circle object to the first inlet of boc.primeForm, and then send the third outlet here to the second inlet of boc.primeForm. This takes the modulus, it tells you how big the modulus is, so PrimeForm knows how to calculate it. So if you were working in other temperaments, you could change this to 72, 19, whatever you wanted, and boc.primeForm would handle it. Then create a message box. I don't know why that's appearing up there. Connect the first outlet of PrimeForm to the second inlet of the message box. And if we dump that, that should display. Right, so we have a PrimeForm of 01389. And lastly, or I keep saying last, maybe second, third to last. We want something to play this to make sure that we get sound and we can hear it if we want. And the easiest way to do it, the quickest way to do it is an object called boc.easy MIDI play. So n boc.easy, the letter easy, and then MIDI play. Connect that to the second to last outlet. Now if we lock the patch and click on the roll and then hit spacebar, we should get sound. I also want to put some comments on some of these things to remind ourselves like what things are doing. You see like my patch here is pretty heavily commented up. You can tell that the most complex part of what's going on is like the order these things are done in. So these triggers, this is a 5-part trigger. It's pretty complex, and what order things are done in matters to the functionality of the patch. So I got to remind myself like, okay, what are these actions and what order they come in? That's what this comment here is telling me. So that's optional for you, but you at least want to put in a comment that tells you like, hey, what is this box? Because this is something you can edit and interact with, and this is something you want to label. So create a comment, press C, and type. I call this examine elements. Control J to trim the comment. And also Control Shift P on that comment to add it to presentation mode, because eventually that's something you're going to want to interact with. Same thing with this message box. Control Shift P on that to add it to presentation and get the little pink halo. Same thing with the role. Control Shift P, that should be looked at in presentation mode too. Same thing with the comment prime up here. That should be the label should be in it. Probably the zoom object should be in it. And here, maybe we don't want to show this actual zoom message, the formatted string. Maybe we can just give this a comment and call this zoom and put that by it, and maybe that's better. So now that label should be in presentation. And then to take something out of presentation, you select it and Control Alt P. Do we need to see anything else? Probably the circle diagram, right? So Control Shift P on that. And the prime form we need to see. And we need to label that prime form. So let's do comment prime form on that to make sure we know what it is. All right, this should be fully functional now, I think. Let's test to just make sure. Let's change this row a few times and watch this change. Yeah, okay, so you see every time we change the row, it sees what elements we want to look at, selects those out, highlights them, shows that set as a clock diagram, and then shows us the prime form. All right, so now we just need to copy this thing we just made 3 more times to get it pasted to do the same thing for the retrograde and the inversion and the retrograde inversion. So that's why we sort of held off. Don't copy the label at the very top because we're going to label them differently. So here we need to delete where it says receive prime 1 and change that to receive retrograde 1. And again, you don't have to name yours retrograde 1. It's just I've already got messages called retrograde here. You can just call yours that. I just don't want to interfere with the patch I already made. I don't think anything else needs to change here. We have everything else sort of done properly. So zoom back out, paste it again. Oops. Same thing. Delete where it says receive prime 1. Say receive inversion 1. Oops. I'm pressing Command S like all the time to save while I work, by the way, which you should also. Okay, paste the last time. Zoom in. Delete where it says prime 1. And finally make the final receive object, which is receive retrograde inversion 1. Did I spell it right? Yeah. Okay, moment of truth. Zoom out and change your row object to see if these change. Oh, okay, here we go. So just examine these and make sure, like, is this the retrograde of that? Yes, it is. And then is this inverted form the same as what we got in the first column here? 11, zoom in. 1108, 1108, yeah. And then is that the inversion here? C sharp A, C sharp A. Yeah, okay, cool. So this is all functional. Now let's just make the presentation mode look good. So we want, if we go to presentation mode right now, you'll see we've added some things to presentation mode, but it doesn't know where we want to put them yet. So let's add a few more things to presentation. So we'll want to look at this matrix. Control Shift P once you clicked on the matrix. And let's label the matrix so we know what it is. Comment row matrix. Command J to trim the comment. And then click on that and Control Shift P to add it to presentation. What else is important to see? probably the name of the row and the comment for that. So select both those things and click Control-Shift-P. And also the row contents and the label for that, Control-Shift-P, and probably the call with all the rows in it. So like if you double click this, you can always edit these and add rows and label them. Maybe we should label that too so we know what to do with it. Double click to edit rows. Control-Shift-P on that comment to add it to presentation. Okay, so it can be a little tricky to move things around in presentation because they'll all be overlapping. So the easiest thing to do is like select everything you know that will be like a group in non-presentation mode, and then go to presentation, and then just sort of click and drag. Well, this one is approximately in the right place anyway, so let's go back and we'll get the retrograde form. And you'll notice that like because it copies whether you want to put it in presentation or not too. So because we made this presentation mode, and then when we copied it, remember to put the prime form label in presentation, because when we copied it, it saves that data that we knew that that object wants to be in presentation. So that it pays to, when you have to create objects that scale and you're going to create something that's modular and you can copy and paste, like do as much of the detail, handle as much of the detail as you possibly can in the original model, and then start copying and pasting. Otherwise you're going to like have to actually, you're going to like create something, copy paste it, and then be like, oh, I want to add this feature and this feature, and you have to do it a bunch of times. So it really pays to try to think ahead and design everything at once and then copy and paste one time. All right, so select all the retrograde stuff, go to presentation mode, and make that go over here. I'm sort of arranging things left to right. That's my idea. You don't have to arrange yours that way, but I think that's logical. All right, let's select all the inversion stuff. Right now we're just sort of trying to get it to not be overlapping. We'll make it all look way better in a second. And finally, the retrograde inversion stuff. So I'm selecting it and then keeping it selected and clicking presentation mode so that I can drag everything as a unit without having to click things separately. Okay, so now that everything's sort of like spaced properly, we can put the diagram a lot closer. I have my original set up here. Let's see. Prime form. Get zoom a little closer. Oh, I put the zoom over here, did I? Prime. Just the label for what it is. And then we'll just do the same thing on every object here. Uh-oh. My prime form label's missing for one of them. We'll have to hunt for it in a second. That might be the wrong prime form label. We'll see. Okay, there's a missing prime form label. Oh, and we also forgot to add the titles presentation. Darn. All right, let's find these. Okay, so I don't know where this prime form label is, so this often happens. So I'd usually just click it and then go to presentation and then like sort of search for where it is. Okay, so that was the wrong one. So it doesn't really matter, but that one should have been over here. So it's really the other one that's missing. So let's go back to presentation. This one is the true one that's missing. Aha. This one's the really one. Oh my gosh, it's all the way in the right corner. Jeez. Okay. Now we gotta add those titles. Oh, we didn't even put them on yet. Okay, great. So comment above each one. You can actually, this is a good time to demonstrate this. If you need something in presentation mode and you want to just put it there immediately, you can just, in presentation mode, create a new comment. You can create objects in presentation mode, you just can't connect connections to them. So this is the retrograde. Control J to trim the comment. This is the comment inversion. Control J to trim it. This is the retrograde inversion. Control J to trim. And now sometimes when you go back in to non-presentation mode, those labels like that you created in presentation can be a little bit like maybe interfering with where you want things to be, so it's good to just go back and clean them up. Okay. Let's make sure our matrix is in place that we want it. Let's go full screen. Our row contents are missing. Oh, we didn't presentation. So make sure to add row contents to presentation so you can see the original row in integer notation. Great. And then is there anything? Oh, the row selector, the number selector. I'm going to add this numbers box up here, Control Shift P on that. That's obviously the number box you drag on with your mouse or arrow keys to change which row is selected. Okay, so I usually like to sort of stack things here in sort of a control center. Maybe the name should come first. Yeah, that's nice. And then maybe we should add a comment like select row. This should really go first. Select row should be second, and then that should be stacked here. Yeah, and then the matrix will be right next to it. And then all this can come up. Like that. Now you usually want us to try to like squish everything so you can see it in your screen. So maybe everything can be a little closer here. All right, let's see how we did. It's not bad. It's a little far away. But there you have it. The 12-tone operations patch, originally by Stratis Minikakis, now in Max MSP. This should all work. Changing the row, gives me a new matrix, shows me the stuff, blah, blah, blah. One small change I just thought about that might make this a little easier to deal with is right now you have to unlock this patch to edit these numbers that you want to select, but there is an object in Max called the text box. New object, text. Oh, text edit. Sorry, text edit. And I believe in here, even when a patch is locked, you can change the numbers. So let's see if this will work. We change this to text edit. Or it might not. I think maybe I tried this. There's something about how this gets converted. Let's see if this works. Get a real row. I have an error message. Let's see. Yep, exactly. That's the problem with this is that sending this the nth object doesn't like this format as text. So I think that was the reason why I had to keep this as a message. So actually I did think about this, but there might be a clever way around this to convert that so that you can, still interact with these numbers while keeping the patch locked. But it's really not a big deal. Just Command E, edit which order positions you want to look at, and then just click, lock it again and click it. We'll highlight what you want. But just keep that in mind that there might be a way to, improve this interface slightly. And you want to be thinking about those sort of things when you're designing patches. Like designing the basic functionality of this patch is not hard. It's designing the little details that make it nice, where it's like, okay, as soon as you change this, like it selects the notes you already have selected. Like this little thing should be longer so that it can accommodate that name. And obviously, it goes without saying that, this can work and display things that aren't 12-tone rows. It's just that this matrix thing isn't going to really make so much sense because it's going to display it as if it's a 12-tone matrix. But like this is obviously a pentachord that was used in a rotational array. So this is not creating a rotational array. It doesn't like sense that automatically. It just pretends it's a 12-tone row and tries to do what it can with it. But there you go. Have fun.